if something happens, it has to have a cause.
Even when it comes to how you behave or the clothes you wear,
Yeah.
you see people that the same person who said 10, 15 years ago, I'm a man, I'm never going to wear those super tight jeans, look like leggings. And this guy could have been like a hardcore guy on the street. So he's not like he's like a masco, fighting, whatever. And then 10 years later, because
he's wearing makeup,
the trend is like that, he's walking around in what look like ladies' leggings.
If you would leave a kid growing up by itself, on an island, no one else there, no society around them trying to influence them, they would believe in God. This is hardwired inside of ourselves.
We as human beings, we have this thing that we have going on inside of us internally, right? So like when you cut yourself or someone cuts them, you feel a certain way. When you see a young child, you feel a certain way. And you have a certain like moral compass, so to speak. In Islam, what is this called and how does it affect having faith or not having faith?
Bismillah wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulullah. Yeah, this is what is called fitrah. So fitrah in Islam is something that we are born with. The scholars have mentioned that it's three main things when we talk about fitrah. So the first thing is our innate belief in a higher power or in a creator. That's one thing. The other thing is that we have certain amount of knowledge about certain things that we don't need any proofs for. As an example, causality. That we think that if something happens, it has to have a cause. So something new happens, we come to this studio or something, we see that something new happened, we don't think that it just happened by itself.
Yes.
We don't need proofs for that. This is what is called causality. If you try to find proofs every time for causality or the law of non-contradiction, that you can't have like this table is at this place and not at this place at the same time. These kind of things, if you try to look for proofs for it, it would just make it harder to understand, because this is something that we have as an innate belief. Even if you say to a small child, as an example, someone is like doing this on its back or something, and you ask it, you say you say to it, no one did it to you. It will not believe you, even if he did not see who did it, because this is something that we have a deep sense of inside of ourselves. So this is also a part of fitrah. And the third thing is that what you mentioned, the moral compass that we have. So people all around the world, they think that justice is better than injustice. They might differ on what justice is and what injustice is and so on, but we have this inner moral compass inside of us that we can see that certain things are better than others. In detail, no, we need more knowledge about these things and so on, but we have a moral compass inside of us. So all of these three things are a part of what is called fitrah in Islam, that we believe in a higher power, that we have a certain amount of knowledge about certain things that we don't need proofs for, and the third thing is the moral compass inside of us. So all of these things points us to something that is bigger than ourselves, a higher power. So the first, the belief that there is a higher power, that people long for, that people believe in, and so on. And the other thing is that we understand that when things happens, it has to have a cause. So we don't think that like if we see a house that starts to exist in a place, we come to go out to the forest, go out to the desert, and we see a house there, we would never believe that it just came about by itself. So this is something that we can understand. If someone would say, no, it just happened by natural forces, and someone would say, no, this is impossible. It couldn't have happened. And the third thing is the moral compass. And all of these things are a part of us as human beings, which is the fitrah in Islam.
You mentioned something about children, and you probably know this study better than me, but I remember there was some kind of study they did where they put children and they didn't let the children's minds be influenced by any particular societal religious belief. And in the end, as the children grew, they ended up believing that there has to be like one kind of creator God out there. Maybe you're more familiar with that than me.
Yeah. So there are many scholars in psychology that have studied these subjects. One of the most famous of them is Justin Barrett. He's a professor in Oxford University. He has been conducted these kind of studies that you mentioned for over 20 years. And he wrote a book about this issue, and he collected many of the different studies. So there are many studies that have been done, and he was part of or he was the head of a bigger study where I think it was like 57 academics from 20 different countries that made these kind of studies on children, and they looked at people from different parts of the world, different cultures, people that come from atheist families or non-believer families, and people from believer families and so on. And the conclusion was from the study that belief in God is part of human nature. So this is something that there have been a lot of studies regarding, but this is also something that we know from our faith, from Islam, because the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said in a famous hadith, "Kullu mawludin yulad ala al-fitra." So all children are born with this fitrah. And the interesting thing that he's mentioning here is that this is not just something that you take from birth, that you take through like education or through your parents and so on. Even kids from non-believing families, they have this intrinsic belief in a higher power. So this is very, very interesting studies that has been conducted the last couple of decades, and this is aligning with our faith when it comes to the fitrah.
If I remember as well, there's also a study, I think, where they discovered that in the human brain there's what they termed as the God spot or something.
Yeah, yeah. There's another scholar that this study that Justin Barrett did is more a study based on psychology, but there are also studies in genetics that they have studied the human brain. This is more controversial. Is it true or not true, and so on? But it's the foundation of it is something that scholars have seen that people all around the world, different cultures, from different times in history, they have a belief in a higher power. So this is something that they have understood. So they try to study it either through biology or through psychology.
Just a couple of days ago, actually, unintentionally, I was going through one of the famous news websites, and an article popped up on that concept of the monkeys. That if you put monkeys, eventually they will type Shakespeare, or they'll type a, and they basically said no.
Yeah.
They've come back and said it's never going to happen.
Yeah.
And this was a very strong, those who deny the existence of God or the creation of the universe, etc., that nothing can just happen. They used to use these kind of examples of you put someone for long enough, monkeys will do it.
Yeah.
So
They
this is
will
one
write
of their kind of theories, isn't it? And they've just come out and said, like, it's not going to happen.
So
they even tried it. When I wrote my PhD thesis, I wrote about this experiment. So this is something old that they have disproved it. But now it came out a new article about it. But they even tried it. So they put a lot of monkeys with these computers and so on, and they only saw that they put a lot of dots, and they even had some problems with they ate and things happen after that. So it was not the kind of results that they wanted, you know. So this is something that they try to use to disprove our fitrah or these proofs that we have. But yeah.
I have something, maybe it's off the topic. Well, it's not off the topic, but you have, I remember one of my family members said to me, I don't know the name of the book, I can't remember it, but it's supposed to be a very famous book. And they use that argument that, this is a social thing, that they felt like they had to, that religion was made up to fit a social need for some control or some higher power. And to me, when I say that, I say to myself, that's the fitrah.
Yeah.
You need to have, there's a creator, you need to have it. But they look at it as some kind of proof that religion was just made up because they felt there was something missing in as society evolved into more organized. They feel like we have to have some superpower as such. So, I mean, how would people respond to that kind of thing? Because that comes up a lot in supposedly it's convincing. I mean, I had a family member who was interested and looking at Islam at one stage to now saying, I'm pretty much, if I'm not an atheist, I'm agnostic because of a book like that.
Yeah, I think that they understand the premise that we have this belief inside. So now they try to explain it. So if they put on their like materialistic non-believing glasses, they will try to explain this phenomena that they see, that people all around the world, what is this? People, we see that like non-belief, materialistic non-belief is something that started like 250 years ago. It hasn't been widespread. They had agnostics and so on during the Greek area and so on. You had some people, but people like a movement with a lot of people denying the belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in a creator. This is something very, very modern. So they have to explain why it is like this. So some people will explain it with different, through sociology, and some people with they will say that this is something evolutionary and so on. They will try to explain away the fact that we really see that people are believing. So they will come with these different explanations, but at the end of the day, the fact that we have this sense inside of ourselves, and they themselves, many people that are denying the belief in God, when they come in distress, they have problems and so on, they will turn to the creator themselves. We turn to something that is higher than ourselves when we are in distress. So it's a famous American general that said during the World War II, he said that there are no atheists in foxholes. So when we're in war and so on, people turn to God. This is something that we have so deep inside of our. So we have a lot of people, they have never studied like theology, philosophy of religion and these kind of things and so on, but they have this deep sense inside of themselves. So this is something, the clearest explanation that there is a creator that created us with this inside of ourselves. So just explaining it through, oh, this happened in this society over there and so on. This is not something that we can find in a specific society. This is universal. This is universal. This is like they mentioned in the study with Justin Barrett. If you would leave a kid growing up by itself on an island, no one else there, no society around them trying to influence them, they would believe in God. This is hardwired inside of ourselves. Yeah.
Something interesting you both touched on there, which is that the distress of a human being. Sometimes we feel distress, and like you said, the argument is that the society created religion. So when you're feeling distress, you have someone to turn to. How does the belief in Allah, the belief in a God, satisfy someone's distress and give them resilience and give them comfort? And how does that contrast in regards to like the materialistic life? Like we go and, as some people do when they get stressed or angry, they take a cigarette or something like that.
Yeah.
How does that like, what does Islam say about that?
Yeah, so one of the most important things that human beings need is meaning in life. We need meaning in life in general, and meaning with different things in life. So we need meaning like an objective meaning with life. And also we need meaning in our daily life with our work and so on. Because if you don't feel meaning, you don't have a why, it's very hard to have a how. So you need a why you are living at all, why you are doing things. If you don't have a strong why, it's very hard to find a how to do things and so on. So I studied psychology of religion. And one of the main things that they say that human beings need in their lives is the why question. We're always searching for meaning. If you don't have belief in God, you will only have a subjective meaning with life. You will say it's only up to you to find your own meaning with life. If you believe in a higher power, you believe in God, you believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you find that there's objective meaning for all of us, So I have the same objective meaning with life as you and people in other country, people throughout history and so on. We as human beings have an objective meaning with life, which is to know our creator and to worship him, to live our lives in accordance to his will, and to do things that he wants from us. This is the concept of worship in Islam. If you only have a subjective meaning with life, some people will not find a subjective meaning at all. But also, in the end, this subjective meaning is really useless. Why? Because now you're striving. If you don't believe in God, you don't believe in the next life, you are striving for something. You're striving to make a lot of money. You're striving to have a lot of power. You're striving for something for yourself. And then one day you will die, everything will disappear, and you didn't make any benefit from the things in the long run. If you look at human history, people have lived, the human race has been around for thousands of years. Someone died 1,000 years ago. He's now dead. He had some subjective meaning with life, to strive for something. Now he's dead. What is the big meaning for that person, what he strived for to gain some money or have some power or something? If you look at the big sense, If you don't believe in the next life, you don't believe in a God, you don't believe that everything that you did was recorded for you, that you will be held accountable for it, it becomes meaningless in the long run. But we as Muslims, we believe that every single thing that we do in our lives has a meaning. We have a broader meaning with life. And when you go to work, you work to gain money for your family and to do something at work. You take care of your family, you do different things, good actions in life. Every single thing will come to you in the next life, and you will be rewarded for that. So there's a deep meaning with every single thing that you do in your life. So this is something very, very beautiful with Islam. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. And I guess that when you have those goals and the meaningful life, you feel a lot more happy and content.
Yeah, of course.
You know where you're going, what you're doing, and why you're doing it, and the reward and result that's coming as a result of that.
Yeah.
So, have you ever come across any studies, or have you come across any studies that show the level of depression across faiths or with people of non-faith? Because we see that there are quite a shift in mental, or the capacity to deal or cope with problems.
Yeah.
In those who have faith and those who don't have faith.
Yeah, there have been studies about suicide rates, about mental rates. You can see, and this is something that is quite interesting, because sometimes they come out with these studies and they say the happiest people in the world, they are from this and that country, and they say they are very happy in this specific country. But usually when they are doing statistics on these things, they are not really asking if they are happy inside, if they really feel content inside. What are they asking for? The questions that they're asking in the surveys are about what? Are you content with the salary that you have? Are you content with the house that you're living in, and so on? So usually people coming from richer countries are more content with the house they're living in, the salary that they have, and these kind of things. They can go to travel and so on. But if you live in a very poor country, you might live, a lot of people living inside a small house. You don't have a good salary. You don't have the things, the materialistic things. But at the same time, we can see people living in these rich countries. They are those taking most antidepressants and so on, going to psychologists, and they have a lot of problems with their inner selves. Like if you look from a psychologist perspective, so they have a lot of problem with anxiousness, distress. A lot of people that are rich are committing suicide and so on. They have to take these medicines and so on. You can see, just as an example, with my country, Sweden, I think it's we have about 10 million people in Sweden. There's more than 1 million taking antidepressants, and these are grown-ups. So, it's from the population, it's a lot of people taking it. Even I know, like, some people that are working in pharmacies and so on in Sweden, they say this is one of the most common thing that people are coming in for. People, they might need some different medicines, but this is one of the most common things that people need, because they feel very distressed with life and so on.
I guess I asked this question because through my own experience, I've done aid work in different countries in the world, and we've helped people who are in very, very difficult situations. And I come back every single time almost, like, question myself, like, these people are happy, man.
Yes,
like, wow, how are they so happy? Like, I just recently got back from a trip, and these little kids don't have anything. They're playing in mud, and they're orphaned, and X, Y, and Z, and they're making me laugh more than I'm laughing myself. And I'm like, what is it about you guys that you feel so happy when you don't have nothing? And then we go flash forward to some house. He's a millionaire, he's X, Y, and Z. He's distressed and he's miserable. X, Y, and Z. What is it? Can you say that faith has a very big impact on a person's emotional well-being, and believing in Allah and acting upon that will really impact the person's well-being?
It's not only something that I say, it's something that has been statistically confirmed, something that you study when you study psychology and religion and so on. You will see a lot of different studies that have been conducted regarding this. But it's also important to see that some people can be religious and they can feel distress by the way they practice religion. So as an example, people that are extreme in their practicing of religion, people that have all these extreme thoughts and so on, they can feel this kind of distress inside because they are not having a balanced faith. So it's not only the thing that you should have faith, you should have correct faith. You should have a balanced faith. You should have knowledge about the way you're practicing religion. Because if you don't have knowledge and you're extreme in the way you try to practice religion, it might lead you to distress and problems. So it's very important not only to have faith, to have the correct faith and have a balanced faith and have it based on knowledge. Yeah.
I guess like the next question is that now we're talking about both sides of the coin, right? Is there any emotional or distress that would lead a person away from having faith or believing in a God? And I say this because we hear often that, oh, if there was a God, then why is there suffering? If there was a God, then why do I feel sad? And I think Stephen Hawkins, he said something like, if there was a God, why did he put me in this situation? That was the reason why he rejected faith.
Yeah.
So what was some of the things that you've come across in regards to the emotional distress or well-being of someone actually doing the opposite? Instead of leading them towards God, it pushes them away.
Yeah. So there have been a lot of studies regarding this issue too. There's the professor in psychology that wrote a book. It's called Faith of the Fatherless. So he is connecting unbelief to childhood trauma, usually. That people had problems with their parents, either that they did not have a father that was there, that died, or that they had problems with in their family in different ways, that he was oppressing them and so on. So he studied the most famous atheists from the last 200 years, and he mentioned political leaders and philosophers and so on, and he mentioned that all of them had these issues.
Wow.
So it's usually childhood trauma that people had that made them reject faith. It can be with their parents, it can be that they had a church leader or an imam or someone else that oppressed them, that led them to these different things. And what has been mentioned in psychology is that people usually take their decisions based on emotions, and then they try to justify them rationally. So if you would ask them, a lot of people, why do you reject faith? They would say, oh, I have studied science and the philosophy and these different things. But if you would try to dig deep, that is just something that they try to justify. Because if they would say, oh, I rejected faith because of childhood trauma and so on, it's not the same kind of thing than saying that, oh, I'm a big scientist and I've studied this or I've studied philosophy and so on. So usually people take their stance first because of different traumas that they had, problems that they had. And then after that, they try to justify it through saying, oh, I've studied philosophy, I've studied science, and this led me to these kind of beliefs.
I remember I had a conversation with one of my relatives when I first became Muslim back when I was young. And I remember one of the things he said was like, you know, my father, your grandfather, for example, was a great man and he died a very painful, slow death of cancer. So that was one of his big so-called barriers, is like, how can there be a God kind of thing, you know? So it wasn't really like, it doesn't make sense, it doesn't this, it doesn't that. It was something that was emotionally feeling him, in his mind, there was some kind of, Abdullah, some kind of oppression. So therefore there cannot be God, because otherwise God would not allow my great, which, you know, was a good man, to die such a death. So that was his barrier.
Yeah, the problem of evil that they call, the problem of evil, they call it the rock of atheism. So they say that this is the main argument that they use. So when they use arguments, either they take arguments that are trying to criticize the proofs of God's existence, or they have which are more like negative proofs that they use because they're criticizing, or they have this as what they will call like a positive proof, like something that they're really using to attack faith. And they are usually using problem of evil, which is in its foundation, it's something emotional. It's usually something that happened to themselves or something that they have witnessed someone else and so on. You mentioned Stephen Hawking, you mentioned here like the grandfather and so on. These kind of things are emotional stances that leads them to question. But if we, inshallah, we might talk about problem of evil, you will see that problem of evil is actually something that is stronger as a proof for God's existence than for non-belief. But usually people haven't heard about the explanations, how you can understand these kind of things, the wisdoms behind pain and evil in the world and so on. But we might come to that after, inshallah.
Inshallah ta'ala. So it just took me a bit back, because I'm just reflecting on all of the discussions I've had with many people over the many years I've become Muslim, is that And like you said, the problem of evil, they always bring this to the table, like why this, that, the other. But I don't know. I've always felt like, you know, you don't know the sun if you don't know the darkness, right?
Yeah.
You don't know the benefits of heat if you haven't felt cold.
Yeah.
I always come to that kind of conclusion in my mind for myself. But obviously we said we're going to touch on the real explanation later. But this also ties into something else, which is that trends. We as human beings, we have a kind of sheep-like mentality. We follow people.
Yeah.
And if we see that it's trending to become atheists or agnostic, a lot of people follow, even though it may not be something innately inside of them.
Yeah.
So I want to ask about how societal trends that have developed over the period, social media now is widespread, the whole movement of if you think like me, you can be in my gang and whatever. Right? How has that affected people disbelieving, and how has it affected people who believe? I think let's start with disbelief, inshallah.
Yeah, if we look at belief, this is the foundation, like I mentioned. This is something that we have inside. This is the fitrah. So we will look at the foundation that we have. The foundation is not the original state of human beings, is not disbelief, it's belief. So people leave belief and they don't leave disbelief.
Okay.
So if we would go back 250 years ago, 300 years ago, you would hardly find anyone disbelieving, having this materialistic non-belief that we see today. And then it started to spread. And when it spread even more and more. And we can see that usually when it spread through violence. And this is something that is very important to understand. Yeah. You can see the French Revolution. This is the first time that really got established. What happened after that? What they call the Age of Terror.
Yes.
Age of Terror, the word terror really came from that word. It came from that time. So terror comes from French to English, but it came from that time, that period of time. They killed, some of them have estimated that it was hundreds of thousands of people that killed, and many of them were priests and so on, because they attacked the churches and they destroyed some churches even at that time, or they made it, they call it temples of reason after the French Revolution. So it started to spread over there in France, and then it started to spread in Germany too. They had not the same kind of revolution, but it was from the king or the emperor Otto von Bismarck. He had the Kulturkampf, that he started to fight against the churches and so on, try to spread more like secularism in the society. But the really big change happened after communism took over in Soviet Union, that really spread through violence. It was like millions and millions of people that died, and they had like the Militant League of Atheism and so on. They had these organizations that tried to spread disbelief in Soviet Union and then in other countries that were communist during that period of time and so on. So it started to spread in a very like violent way, but it also started to spread in Western countries. And usually it was like they had positions, people that were secular or people that were non-believers at all. They had positions in media or in education departments and so on, and they started to spread these kind of thoughts from upside. And now when we have social media, they have used social media to spread the kind of trends that you're saying. And we can see that it goes in waves. So it was like after 9/11, they had what is called the New Atheist Movement. It started to spread a lot in countries. And then it went down, and then it comes up and it comes down. You can see in different countries, different trends, that it goes up and down in different countries and so on. But usually people are like that. People are like following the trends. So if they see that something is spreading, they are looking what is called social proof. In psychology, you are persuaded when you see a lot of other people go in a specific trends, or the proof of authority. You see something that someone that you look up to, someone, a politician, someone in culture sphere and so on, that is atheist or refusing faith, and they are following these kind of trends after that.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's interesting because you see that, right? You see like even when it comes to how you behave or the clothes you wear, you see people that the same person who said 10, 15 years ago, I'm a man, I'm never going to wear those super tight jeans. Look like leggings. And this guy could have been like a hardcore guy on the street. So he's not like he's like a masco, fighting, whatever. And then 10 years later, because
he's wearing makeup,
the trend is like that, he's walking around in what look like ladies' leggings. So it's really...
it's quite interesting with a professor in social psychology, it's called Robert Cialdini, he studied the psychology of persuasion. Okay, so he said that I have been studying this and I found thousands of different reasons why people are persuaded in different things, but it all comes back to 6 principles that we have, and one of them is social proof. That people look at others and they're following trends.
Yeah.
And the other one is the proof of authority. So you look up to someone. It's not like it's a trend, but you look up to someone who's an artist or some influencer and so on, and then you follow him because you look up to that specific person. So these are 2 of the main things why people are persuaded.
Wow.
What it comes back to.
Wow. Like, now you've mentioned something that I want to really go into, the proofs. You know, you say that proofs, the power of persuasion, social proofs, whatever they may be. But someone's going to argue now, okay, what is the proof from the universe and from everything else that there is a creator?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I would say, normally to people, I say design necessitates designer, right? And creation necessitates a creator.
Yeah.
Your Louis Vuitton bag didn't just come into existence by itself.
Yeah.
But they'll argue something else, Big Bang, X, Y, Z, so on and so forth. So how does this world in which we live in point to a creator, and how does that prove the existence of the creator?
Yeah, it's a good question, and like I mentioned in the beginning, we have this inner sense in ourselves that's called fitrah, that there is a higher power, and then we have this inner sense also when it comes to causality, that we know that if something happens, something starts to exist, it has to have a cause. It can't just come about by itself. So this is not something that we need a proof for. This is something that is innate, something that we know deep inside of us, and someone who is really denying it is just, this is something that scholars have mentioned, that you shouldn't argue with people who are denying causality and these things that are necessary knowledge. Because if I would talk to someone here and I would say that this table that came here or this microphone, it just came about by itself. If someone is arguing, he does not really believe in it himself. He's just trying to make an argument for the sake of the argument. And I remember one time I talked to an older lady about this issue, and she said that all knowledge is, all things are relative. There is nothing that is absolute. There's no absolute knowledge. So I said that, okay, so you believe that gangsters that are killing others and murdering people and selling drugs, that it's relative, it's up to them if they think that it's good? She said yes. And I understood, because she has to be consistent now, because I'm trying to now, I know that she's not consistent. So I said to her, okay, what you are saying right now, that all knowledge is relative, is that relative or is it absolute? She said, this is the only thing that is absolute.
Yeah, you catch them up, right?
So this is, she's just making an argument for the argument itself. All people know deep inside of themselves that nothing happens without a cause. If something starts to exist, it has to have a cause, something that made it exist. So as an example, I mentioned with the forest, you go out, you see a house that is built there. No one would say that it just came about by itself. If someone is saying, it just happened by itself, natural forces and so on, you know that deep inside he's not really true to himself. He's just saying that. But at the same time, you can see that most people that are non-believers, they would say, no, I would never say that even like this cup here came about by itself, or this microphone, that is impossible. Okay, what about the universe? What about the whole, the sun, the moon, the galaxies, and so on? Even if they say the Big Bang, what are they saying? They're saying the how, what happened, the process. They're not explaining who was behind it, why did it happen?
Or for example, that atom, who created that first atom that caused the Big Bang?
Yeah, where'd that come from?
Even if you're going to try and say it's
you're
Big
just
Bang,
going back and back and back and back.
there
and
was
so
the original atom. Where did that come from?
So they're only taking the process back, or they are changing the question. And I've seen some of the people that are arguing for disbelief and so on. They are saying that if someone asks you who or why, they're really asking you for how. So talk about the how question. They're fleeing away from the why question and who, because they know that this will lead to implications. And you can see the non-believers before they found out that, like the Big Bang theory, they were all saying that universe was eternal, so it has always existed. But when there were more and more evidence and more proofs
Of
that
an
proved
origin.
that we can see that the universe is not eternal. You can see that a lot of non-believers that were against this theory. They said that this leads to many philosophical implications that are really dangerous here. We don't want this. And then they had to accept it. But they say that, okay, now in science, we can only talk about what happened after the Big Bang and not what happened before it. We have like a shield here. We can't understand what happened before that. So don't talk about it. Don't go through and stop there and don't think about the implications after that and so on. So we can see that we have this innate belief that if something starts to exist, it has to have a cause. And we can see that it's not just about the whole universe itself, all the things that we can see around us. We as human beings, we started out with one single small cell that is, we can have like, I think it's like in 1 centimeter or 1 millimeter, you can have like 6,000 sperm cells on 1 single centimeter or millimeter. It's like very, very, very small. And then it develops to like a kid when it comes out, it's like 3 kilos, 4 kilos, and so on, with a brain, with a heart, with everything inside it. Who's the one creating it? Allah Azza wa Jalla mentioned in the Quran, هو الذي يصوركم في الأرحام كيف يشاء. Allah Azza wa Jalla is the one who's creating you inside of the wombs in the way that He wants. So this is something the parents doesn't have any control over it at all. So even the creation of humans, we have like thousands of billions of cells inside of us, and each cell is more complex than the factors that we have that people have created today. So we have like thousands of billions of factories inside of us. And this is something like, okay, how can you explain that? It's impossible to explain these kind of things. So that is one of the proofs that you can use. That is the proof of creation. If something starts to exist, then it has to have a cause. It has to have a sufficient cause that makes it exist. And you can't explain like the whole universe, the existence of the universe and all the things inside of it, that it's something that just happened by pure chance, or something that we have created as humans, because Allah Azza wa Jalla mentioned in the Quran, أَمْ خُلِقُوا مِنْ غَيْرِ شَيْءٍ أَمْ هُمُ الْخَالِقُونَ أَمْ خَلَقُوا السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضَ بَلْ لَا يُوقِنُونَ. Was it created out of nothing, or did it create itself? Or did they create the heavens and the earth? No, they don't have knowledge about anything. They don't have certainty about anything. So it's impossible that it started to exist by itself. It's impossible that something that did not exist created itself, or that human beings did not create the universe. It has to be an outside creator that is outside of the universe, that was extremely powerful, has a will and knowledge about everything and so on. And this is what we mean when we say that we believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
This is very interesting, and I remember hearing, I don't know which famous atheist was talking about when he was looking at an ear, and when he looked at the design of an ear and he pondered over it and how it's designed and how the frequencies X, Y, Z, he had to stop himself, because it was going to lead to, we know what it was going to lead to. So I want to ask, what are the signs of God, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in nature itself? As you mentioned, the organisms, the cells, and X, Y, Z. And I think for me personally, I'm very fascinated with nature. I watched one episode of a very famous presenter. He said, if you take an ant out of an ecosystem, it can collapse it. Simple as that. So he was saying that basically each thing in nature affects each thing on a massive scale. So have you found something in your findings?
Yeah, so what we were talking about before was like the proof of creation, that if something starts to exist, then it has to have a sufficient cause that made it to exist. That's when you look at something that starts to exist. Then you can look at the design in something of that specific thing. That is what's called the argument of design.
Okay.
And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned in the Quran, سَنُرِيهِمْ آيَاتِنَا فِي الْآفَاقِ وَفِي أَنفُسِهِمْ حَتَّى يَتَبَيَّنَ لَهُمْ أَنَّهُ الْحَقِّ. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will show them His signs in the horizons, like in the heavens and the earth and the universe and so on, وَفِي أَنفُسِهِمْ, inside of themselves, حَتَّى يَتَبَيَّنَ لَهُمْ أَنَّهُ الْحَقِّ, until they will understand and they will know that this is the truth. So we have signs in the universe. We can see it through the laws of nature. We can see it like the different probabilities of things that are inside of or outside in the university that we can study in physics and cosmology and these kind of things. And we can see it inside of ourselves. we as humans, animals and other things, that they are designed. So we can see the signs everywhere. You don't have to look far away. You can just look at yourself. You just, like you said, look at the ears, the eyes to use. People that are non-believers, they say, I don't see any signs for the creator, but they're using their eyes. And the eyes are one of the greatest signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They're using their brains. And scholars, they mention that the most complicated thing in the whole universe is the human brain. There's nothing that is more complicated than the human brain. It's extremely complicated, and this is proof of design. And it's more complicated than the best supercomputers that we have today. And the same thing with the eyes. The eyes that we have are better than the cameras that we are using now to film. It's incredible, and they're all signs of a creator because they are designed. And if you have a design, you have to. If you have something that's designed, you have to have
a couple
a
of days
design.
ago, someone shared a design, and it had like a robotic hand, and it was like intelligent, designer.
Yeah.
Then it had a human hand, which was like nothing in comparison. Amazing amount of like veins and tendons and everything. And then they just put by coincidence.
Yeah. You can just see, subhanAllah, the veins that
Even
we have.
I think it's the human. I think it's the intestines. If you were to stretch them out, they go like 2 or 3 football pitches long or something. SubhanAllah.
The veins that we have inside where the blood goes around, and you can take it from
around
one person more than 2 times around the earth.
Not only that, just for me personally, I'm not into all these studies and stuff myself personally, but we have general, like you said, the fitrah, we have general knowledge. I do general research, but the ability for a woman who has organs inside of her body, to shift and move, to have a full grown baby, it's absolutely mind-bending. It's incredible. Like everything, and like you say, as it's mentioned in the Quran, the sign is there for people who want to really reflect. So there is a verse that comes to my mind, and God the Almighty said the translation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said the translation of from his signs is that he created mates from amongst yourself. So how can we see a sign of Allah in the fact that he's created union, relationships, parents, these kind of connections? Where are the signs in that?
So we can see the sign in us as human beings. If we will talk like about computers, we have the hardware, which is the computer, and we have the software. So we also the software, the guidance of people, are also the instincts that we have inside of ourselves, are also signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So as an example, we could take with different animals. They are doing things. We can have a bird that is migrating for more than 10,000 kilometers and then goes back to the specific place where it came to. We have fishes that goes away. We have a kid that is a child that is just born and it knows that it has to breastfeed. And all of these things are guidance inside of humans and animals and living beings and so on. If we will talk about the software here. So this is something that we have. And this shows us also that we need a transcendent creator who created these kind of things inside of us. This is not something like the kid did not go to school and know that it has to breastfeed. We don't have it with these some of these birds that are migrating from one place to another. They go by themselves. They don't have anyone teaching them. They know where there's something inside of them that knows where to go and know where to go back, know how to eat. We have ants that sometimes thousands of ants cooperating together for one specific purpose to build their houses. You have bees that are building these incredible houses that they have, and they know how to do these things. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in the Quran.
Something I thought of when you were saying that is just recently had some cats at home that gave birth, and it's amazing how when the cat gives birth, that it will bite that, as one of them has a baby, the umbilical cord, they come and cut it.
It chews it off.
It knows it has to chew it off. So even that's just amazing how everything just fits in. You don't usually have a cat who doesn't know, like, what do I do here? I mean, there could be a cat, obviously, that maybe is mentally challenged, but generally speaking, you don't get one cat just says, I don't know what to do, You may get some cats like humans that are better mothers than others, but they all know that this is exactly what has to be done. Even us as humans, we have to kind of go and read. The woman, she goes and reads a book. what do I do when I give birth?
Yeah.
But the animals,
Mm.
subhanAllah, it's naturally in
Naturally
them.
But even humans nowadays, we are reading books, but this is something that humans themselves are guided to this,
I was
because
gonna say.
women have been given birth since
ages.
before books,
That's
you know,
what-
since ages,
exactly,
you know.
yeah.
So they have been knowing what to do. So this is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guided us to. And it's very interesting if we reflect upon the Quran, how many verses we can find in the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls us to reflect.
Yeah.
All of us sees these kind of things. You can even see that some scholars, some doctors, they see these things every day. They've studied these things, but they're not reflecting. Okay, if I see these things, it must lead me to faith. Because this is the implication that it has to lead to. So some people, they're just putting like a shield between themselves and faith, so they're stopping with the reflecting thing and just having the information about this thing, but not what it leads to, which is to faith, to a creator.
Yeah, exactly. And we have all of these different signs. We have the fitrah, as you mentioned. We have causality. We have the signs in the creation, the universe, so on and so forth. But we also have been given an extra thing from God the Almighty. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent guides and messengers as proofs. So what about that, introducing that as a proof? Because we have people who say, I don't believe in the Big Bang, and this, oh, I believe in the Big Bang, I believe this, and other, and I don't want to reflect my fitrah X, Y, and Z. But what about the prophets and messengers that came with miracles from their Lord in order to prove to the people that there was a creator?
Yeah, subhanAllah, you can see that it's quite interesting that every proof that proves that a messenger is a messenger from God, it's a proof that he's a messenger. It also proves the God who sent him.
Yeah.
So some people, they come to faith not by reflecting upon the design, the creation, and so on, but because of they read something from the Quran. They read about the biography of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They said, I was an unbeliever before, but when I read this, I understood that he has to be a messenger. Messenger of who?
Yeah.
Messenger of a creator.
Yeah.
So it leads them to faith. So some people, they start from belief in God and then comes down to belief in messengers and so on. And some people, they start with belief in messengers and leads them to belief in God. So all of the signs of prophethood are also signs for belief in God. So different things in the Quran, scientific miracles in the Quran that's been mentioned and so on, each of them are also a sign for a creator who revealed the Quran to us and so on.
You know, what's very, very interesting is that I had a conversation once. I was just got my hair cut. I stepped outside the barber shop, and then someone approached me and started to talk to me, and from guidance from God the Almighty, you know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I just came to my mind this concept, and I said, I just want to say something to you. Okay, Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, he existed. Everyone knows he existed. Historians can't deny he existed. He said there'll come a time where barefoot, naked, destitute herdsmen would compete over building the most loftiest tower. Where's the biggest building in the world right now? And he said, yeah. And then I go, so how would he know that? And then the person said, because he had to have got it from the one who knows. And I said, who's the one who knows? He said, God.
Yeah.
I was just like,
this is an example. This is a perfect example.
Said, there you go.
Mashallah.
That's it. So what are you going to do from here? I asked him. He said, to be honest with you, I'm going to go and read more. Wow. I said, well, that's what you need to do, because the reality is, if you take these steps, how did the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, recite verses about the embryonic development of a child in such detail?
Yeah.
I asked also one very stern, staunch atheist this question. How is it possible we know at such a micro level the development of a child back then? The answer I got was just even proves that how ridiculous this belief of atheism is. They cut open a woman and monitored her. It's impossible.
But they had to do with many women.
Exactly, many women. And not only that, it's microscopic. How do you know the time of conception actually took place? Yeah. And how do you know when the time of conception took place, that small sperm, as you mentioned, like if you took 1 millimeter, how many you can fit, actually, germinated the egg, and the egg started, and you can't see it. Yeah. And
funny enough, only I think it was 150 years ago, Western scientists believe that when the sperm came out of the man, it was actually you know how the baby's born?
Yeah.
They believe that's what the sperm looked
was,
like.
yeah.
But it just kind of grew like a plant.
Yeah.
The Quran's telling us that it becomes like an alaqa.
Yeah.
Alaqa in Arabic
Mudghah.
means
Yeah.
something that is hanging,
Yes.
or a clot, or a leech.
Yeah.
And when you see the embryology, it looks like the blood clot is hanging and it looks like a leech.
Yes,
Then mudghah,
Mudghah, صح.
which is something like a chewed piece of meat. When you
Yeah.
look at it, the flesh the baby starts to become before it
The
becomes a
spine
fetus.
comes in. It looks like chewing gum.
Someone's bitten on a piece of meat.
Yeah.
So, it's impossible. I mean, no matter what you say, no one can explain that. I remember one time when I was working for an exhibition, and we had a lot of tourists coming in. A guy came in, and I started talking to him, come and have some tea and coffee, and what do you think of the exhibition? He's like, "Oh, I'm an atheist. I'm a professor in chemistry and physics and biology." And I thought, "Oh, here we go. He's gonna." No, I thought he's gonna come out with some stuff that I'm not familiar with.
Yeah.
That may look like it's not about winning the argument, but maybe I'm thinking to myself, maybe he might come out with a theory I've never heard of. Anyway, so he's talking and whatever. I just said to him, "Look, did you see in that first room?" He's like, "No, I don't want to go in. I'm not into this religious stuff." Because we were in a very traditional palace, so it was a very nice building anyway. And then, so he basically, so I went through the mudghah, the alaqa. I went through the, we've created the mountains as pegs.
Yes, right.
Another verse, if the there otherwise lest the earth would
It will
shake.
Yeah.
So I went through all these things, maybe only 5 or 6, and in the end, I said, "Would you at least take these books?" And he was like, "Oh well, yeah, I'll have a read." At the beginning, and this is a university professor, biology, chemistry, physics. So just by me quoting these things and saying, "How can this be?" If it wasn't known,
Yeah.
maybe 60 years ago with the laser technology
Exactly.
for geology studies, they wouldn't
Exactly.
know this.
Yeah.
How? If oceanography was only released, they knew about the two seas
Seas
not mixing,
meeting, yeah.
invisible barriers. How? It's got nothing to do with you being a seaman and going on the ocean. Let's just say
exactly.
Prophet Muhammad swam underwater, was on a boat, peace be upon him. That wouldn't explain seeing invisible
invisible
barriers that
barriers.
you can't see.
Exactly. Yeah.
So just by the end of that conversation, and I'm no scientific person, when he was like, "I don't want any of this religious stuff," he literally said, "I'll take them and have a read on the plane."
Yeah, subhanallah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
You know what's really, really interesting? And I don't know how some people will explain this away by saying, "Okay, but how do we know that your faith is the correct faith because this happens to me?" So this is the kind of dual question. One of the signs of a creator is that we have what's known in Arabic as in Islam as dua al-ibadah, which you do a certain thing, and then dua al-mas'ala, right? Which are two different types of supplication. Yeah. You have a supplication where you actually raise your hands and you request something. You have a supplication that you do actions in order for the result to come. Yeah. Now, this one's very interesting, is that you want something internally, and you, for example, give a 1 dirham in the charity pot, and the only one who knows, if we talk about it from a materialistic level, what you want from that 1 dirham is yourself. But then you get what you want from that action itself. Shows that the creator who created you who has all knowledge
has rewarded you.
For it. Exactly.
I want to say one thing. We kind of this point you're going to talk about as well, I guess, when people pray and our prayers are answered, as well as what he mentioned. Maybe we could end on this point. I'll tell you why, because I know we have a plan afterwards to talk about common, like objections to faith, but I really think that should be a follow-up episode.
Okay.
Just like this episode, does God exist? We really should have like
objections to
common
faith.
objections, or why faith is troublesome. Something like that.
Exactly.
That deserves a whole. I think we should have a whole separate.
And maybe
episode
people
on that.
who are watching can put some comments on the comment section.
And
we can
take
discuss
them
those
also.
comments.
I think that we definitely
perfect,
maybe in a couple of months or so we have a follow-up.
And maybe we can
episode.
leave them with a challenge of go on, supplicate as well and see what happens.
Yeah, it happens. Some people, they come to faith, like you mentioned, that person, okay, it maybe not come to faith, but some people, they come to faith through science. So they see these scientific miracles in the Quran, or some people that they have studied the design in the universe and the design inside of people, and it leads them to faith. And some people, they have more subjective reasons that lead them to faith. So we can see that science is more like objective. This is how the universe is. This is how people are. Some people, they have experiences in their life, so it leads them to faith. So there are some people that are non-believers, but then they come to this like anxious moment in their life, or something happened with them, and they raise their hands. They say, "I'm a non-believer," but they say, "God, if you're there, please answer my question. Please answer my request. This happens to me." and they get their prayers answered. And this leads them to faith. SubhanAllah, this has happened to a lot of people, that they say that they are non-believers. Something happened in their life, some moment they might have been in distress, in something that happened to them, something happened to their kids, and so on. They pray to God, their prayers were answered, and that led them to faith. So we have objective reasons that people might have, and we have subjective experiences in life that can lead people, and they can even be more convincing for a lot of people than just studying the different scientific miracles and so on, because this is something that they really felt inside of them, and that led them to faith. So this can also be something, and like you said, you should be open-minded. If you're not a believer, you should be open-minded and pray to God. You can see what it can lead to, and subhanAllah, it can have a huge effect on a lot of people if they are sincere. If they are really sincere, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will guide them. This is something that really happened to me, because I was raised in a non-believing family, and then when I was interested in Islam. When I started to pray to God, I got the guidance from God, subhanAllah.
You know, it's really a story that I found very profound. One of my colleagues in the UK, he had a colleague or associate, and his daughter was born with one of those rare conditions where the chromosome was not right or something. You know, when the chromosome is not right, it means your child it's not going to go forward, the life of the child. And he's telling the story to my colleague, who my colleague told it to me. He said that at that moment I was an atheist and I was desperate. And I knew that, you know, people of faith normally ask God and so on and so forth and whatever else. The doctors gave me no option at all. So he said, I found a multi-faith room. And I went to the multi-faith room and I said, God, if you exist, cure my daughter and let her live. And I promise you, I will find the religion in which you want me to follow, and I'll follow it.
Wow.
So when he went back into the room, the doctors were all running around, like he said, they were frantic. And he was like, what's happened? And they said, we've done a test again and there must be a glitch. Nothing is wrong.
Wow.
So he said, the guy said, from this moment, he's telling the story to my colleague, from that moment, because he found Islam, and that's why he met my colleague. He said, from that moment, I started to search into Christianity, to Judaism, X, Y, and Z.
He was sincere.
He was sincere. Yeah. And then he stumbled across Islam, and he said, when every other religion I looked into, I researched, there was a problem logically. It didn't fit the the bill. And then he submitted.
Didn't tick all the boxes.
It didn't tick all the boxes.
I say to everybody, does it tick all the boxes?
It doesn't tick all the boxes. And he said that Islam was the only faith that he found ticked every single box. And what he found even more interesting is that any question he had, there was an answer. And he ended up, embracing Islam. And I'll tell you, like, for those people who might be watching and say, okay, this is a far-fetched story from someone far away. I'll tell you a story of someone who's even closer to me. A friend of mine who I was with and next to and living with and in and out of his house. His mother had cancer, breast cancer that developed to lung cancer. And doctor said, finished, prepare yourself for death. So I'm with my friend, we've gone for dinner, I'm trying to console him. He said to me, I'm going to take my mother one last time to make Umrah. She's made a request. So he goes on this trip and he comes back, we go for dinner again, and he's happy, he's in high spirits.
Wow.
And I remember exactly where I'm sitting, I remember exactly the restaurant, and I'm asking him, why are you so happy, man? Like, what's happened? Like, your mother's about to, I'm thinking in my mind, your mother's about to die. Why you? He said, bro, you never guess what? I said, what's wrong? He goes, she's gone back to the hospital for treatment. There are no signs of the cancer at all.
Wow, subhanallah.
Subhanallah. And I'm like, nah. And he's like, bro, I'm telling you, the doctors did a test, another test.
Wow.
And I asked him, what did your mother do? He said to me, she went to the Kaaba, she was praying and crying to Allah. She was washing herself with Zamzam and so on and so forth. And she's come back, cancer is non-existent.
Wow. It's incredible, subhanallah.
And we know many stories like this. I can tell from my own circle in myself, I can tell you stories like this.
There are so many stories about that. SubhanAllah, one of the scholars, Sheikh Abdullah bin Nasr Sueidi, rahimahullah, when he mentioned the proof of answering a prayer, he said that this is something that is happening all around the world, throughout history, for believers and non-believers, for righteous people and non-righteous people.
Yeah.
Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أَمَّا يُجِيبُ الْمُضْطَرَّ إِذَا دَعَاهُ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala answers the prayer of the one who is in need when he needs it. So it can be for a believer or a non-believer. It can be for someone who's righteous, not someone who's not righteous. And someone might say that, okay, some people's prayers are not accepted. But there's a difference here, because if you can see that you ask for something and you are given that specific thing, and you can see that it happens time after time after time, this is a proof for the existence of someone who is giving you this specific thing. But the opposite is not true. So as an example, if you ask someone for something and he does not give it to you, it does not mean that he does not exist. It might be different reasons why he does not give you that specific thing. It might be wisdom why you shouldn't have that specific thing. As an example, a kid might ask you for candy the first time, the second time, the third time. It's not good for you to have that specific thing, you know. It will hurt you. So if you don't get the specific thing that you need, maybe you will get something else. Maybe you're not sincere. Maybe you're doing sins. Maybe you're doing things.
Maybe it's,
So there can be different reasons why you don't have it. But when we see that there are so many proofs that people have accepted prayer, this is all there are all examples and proofs for the existence of a creator who's
That
answering
ayah,
prayer.
maybe I'm remembering it wrong, get my ayahs mixed up, but if I'm not mistaken, that ayah where Allah says, does Allah not answer the dua, the one who calls upon him who's in need? Doesn't at the end of the ayah mention, is there a God?
Ilahum
Ma'
Allah.
Allah.
No.
You know?
Yeah.
It's a so even that's telling you, I answered your dua. Is there any other God with Allah? So even that points to people that there is only one God, you know?
Subhanallah. Allahu Akbar.
You know, like you said, this is a good place to end. And I think, I'm thinking in my head to pose a challenge to the audience. They watch the Inspirable, maybe Muslim or non-Muslim. Those of you who are non-Muslim, maybe some of you who are losing faith, I pose a challenge to sincerely from your heart, raise your hands and supplicate and ask God the Almighty, Allah, for guidance and for the things you need, and see. Because at the end of the day, the proofs are all around us. And if you ask for your eyes to be open up to the proofs that are around you, I'm sure 100% the one who wants us to worship him alone will allow the people who are sincerely to worship him alone.